Hi, today I'm going to show you how I've been painting the power armour of my Tome Keepers Space Marines. I will be using Citadel paints predominantly, but I'm sure you can achieve wonderful results with different brands if you don't have the exact paints mentioned in this video. I hope you will find this guide useful. If you do, please let me know with a like. Feel free to also subscribe and ring a bell to be informed of similar videos in the future too. To give ourselves an easier time, I would recommend priming the miniature with an off-white primer. I have used Army Painter's Skeleton Bone colour primer and Wraithbone contrast primer previously, but for this particular model I used Vallejo Skeleton Bone surface primer through an airbrush. Now I establish a solid base coat of bone colour like Ushabti Bone on all of the armour. I went over this model with an airbrush initially, touching up with the brush afterwards, but you could apply this base coat with a brush only if you like. As I used a bone coloured primer, this stage is pretty fast, but you may need to do a few more passes if you started from a different colour. With a lighter bone colour, like Screaming Skull, spray a thin layer downwards over the model at a 45-degree angle. This is to simulate where the light would hit and to make the next stage of highlights we apply blend in easier. If you don't have an airbrush, you could simply dry brush this colour in using downward strokes only, or glaze in where the light would hit, or even skip this step entirely. Now is a great time to paint the tubing of the under armour. I like to base coat the areas with Mechanica Standard Grey, before washing the area with a 1-to-1 mix of Black Templar and Contrast Medium. I then pick out the prominent ridges with Dawnstone, smaller highlights of Administratum Grey, and dot highlights of Ulthuan Grey as a final specular highlight. As we are starting from such a light colour, it is essential that we darken down the recesses of the armour to build contrast and make it look a little more interesting. For this, I like to take some Skeleton Horde and thin it with an equal amount of Contrast Medium. I use a relatively thin brush and paint into all of the recesses, being pretty neat in areas with well-defined recesses. But don't be afraid to smush it into hands, etc., where picking out the details individually would be too hard. Contrast paints are designed to flow into recesses, so applying a decent amount and letting it settle gives us some nice variation in tone when it dries. I would however recommend using the tip of your brush on shallower details to avoid cleanup later. I find glazing a mix of Skeleton Horde and Contrast Medium into shadowed areas is very effective too, especially under arms, the underside of knee pads, and bits like that. If you need to clean up a mistake or smooth a transition, a quick pass with a damp brush works wonders. For particularly deep recesses, I like to take a finer brush and carefully pop a little Agrax Earthshade into them. This is an optional step, but well worth the time. We will be highlighting up to pure white soon, so this little extra darkness is very effective in my opinion. Now it is time to apply a chunky highlight of Screaming Skull to all of the edges of the model. With a rough zenithal highlight of this colour from before, this highlight should be quite subtle, but this should start hardening up those edges. I like to use the same cheapo size 0 synthetic brush I used for that initial recess shade. In areas where the paint has not hit, you may want to do finer highlights, but most of these will be tucked away, so don't worry too much. If you're feeling fancy, you can also add volumetric highlights to rounded areas like knees and toes. Always keep your paint thin for the step, dragging the brush towards the centre where the light would hit. To make those edges really stand out, I now take a smaller brush and add a fine highlight to all of the edges again, this time with Pallid Witch Flesh. Even though I use a slightly thinner brush, for most edges I use the side of my brush and simply drag it along, only using the tip for areas where this is not possible. If you are adding in the volumetric highlights mentioned previously, add in a smaller highlight, ending your brush stroke at the relevant point. For the final highlight, take a pure white of your choosing and selectively highlight the most exposed edges and points where highlights meet. Don't worry about highlighting the whole edge. These final white highlights are to add a little volume and draw eyes towards them. Keep your paint nice and thin and always drag the brush towards where the light would hit. This will make the white more intense, defining the edges further. Once again, add in another highlight to the knees, toes, shoulder pads, and bits like this. This highlight should be very small now. You could easily stop painting the armour now if you wanted a factory fresh look, but I've been enjoying adding a little battle damage to my Marines recently. First, take some Mournfang Brown and add in small patches of dots with an occasional line here and there. I recommend focusing the damage towards edges where it would more easily occur. An occasional chip can be justified anywhere where a Marine could feasibly be hit. To finish up the chipping, underline it with Pallid Witch Flesh and you are done on the bone coloured portion of this armour. I tend to labour over the shoulder trim and black details a lot less, base coating with Abaddon Black, edge highlighting with Eshin Grey, and then adding in highlights with the same neutral grey recipe of Dawnstone, Administratum Grey and Ulthuan Grey from earlier. Now finish up the rest of the details on your model. including the coloured chest device for your chosen company, and you should have a nice looking marine. I've really enjoyed painting these boys for my kill team, and I'm very excited to add in more and share them with you on Instagram. If there are any other chapters, factions or sub-factions you would like to see me tackle in future videos, please let me know in the comments below. If I feel like I can put something useful together, I would gladly do a video for popular requests. But that's it for now. You can find ways to support me linked in the description, including a link to my Amazon page. It is packed with products that I recommend. Starting your next hobby spree there doesn't cost you an extra penny, but I would really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, enjoy your hobby, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.